So, I want to talk about my reading experience lately, which has not been stellar. So, this is going to be kind of a rambly video, hopefully not too boring or whiny, but we'll see. This not so great reading experience has been brought on by trying to read the Booker 2024 long list, which was a disaster because those books sucked. But this is a problem for me beyond just the Booker list. So, let's talk a little bit about what kind of a reader I am. So I'm a mood reader. I usually don't make like 2 read lists or have reading goals or whatever. I usually don't give a book 5 stars. 3 or 4 stars for me is a good rating. But for me to give a book 5 stars, it just has to be an extra special experience. And I don't put a ton of stock into star ratings anyway. I mean, on my videos, I hardly even really mention star ratings. And I would like to enjoy more books. I love the experience of reading. I love language. I love etymology. I love grammar. I love punctuation. I love it all. And in a way, because I love it so much, I'm more critical. I see people on social media and they just love every frickin' thing. Everything is 5 stars and, or they're bawling because they read this or that. They're very enthusiastic. And I'm just like, whatever you're on, can I have some? I mean, let's be honest. Some of that enthusiasm is probably for views. Maybe I'm being too cynical. I don't think I am. But are you being discerning if you love everything? I mean, some of my favorite books aren't that great. They just resonated with me in some way. So I'm all for loving whatever you love. And maybe I'm just jealous that I don't love most of the stuff I read. But a lot of the books I read, I just don't think the writing, the pacing, the characters, the plot, the whatever, the magic fairy dust that has to be sprinkled on a book to make it great for me. It's just there's a problem with the fairy dust supply chain. And I don't want to be a hater, but I often am. I mean, in my defense, even though I end up DNFing some books, I think it's important to give a book a chance because that book is somebody's baby and they've put their blood, sweat, and tears into it. So any book I start, I read a third of it. But at that point, if it doesn't grab me, I got to dip out. I say I'll call, but I never do. And I'm not talking about hard books when I say that. Hard books have to be wrestled with. You just got to hang in there if it's a hard book. And some books I read and I realize they're good books, maybe even great books, but they're just not for me. I just read Skippy Dies. That was a good book. I hated all the characters, so I stopped reading it. Lonesome Dove. Great book, great writing, great characters. I wasn't enjoying it, so I didn't finish. I realize a lot of the books I don't enjoy aren't necessarily bad books, but a lot of them are bad books, I think the problem with my reading, I don't know exactly how to describe this. Okay, there are some things that I love the idea of, but not really the reality of. I love the idea of traveling. I love the idea of experiencing another culture, the art, the architecture, the vibe of a place, the people. But parts of traveling are kind of a pain in the ass, I'm afraid reading is becoming kind of the same way. I mean, that's not a complete parallel with reading because I do enjoy the process of reading. So despite the lack of a parallel, if I'm going to make traveling an enjoyable experience, I have to set certain parameters around how I travel so I can enjoy myself. And I think the solution is going to be the same for reading. I'm going to have to set up some guidelines. I'm going to have to figure out what the problem is and then set up certain guidelines. So what are the problems? I think there are a few factors. One thing is I watch a lot of BookTube, and there's about 20 booktubers that I really love, and I get swept up in their books, and I want to fall in love with those books as well. And most of the books they read are not to my taste. And I think if somebody said, only read what you want to read and don't compare your reading to someone else's reading, don't read for anyone else, I would say, well, of course. I'm only reading for myself. But maybe my thing with BookTube is a low-key version of that. So I think step one is not to take recommendations for a while. And this is something I've been thinking about, and it's something that I've been trying to practice for the past week or so. And it is really, really hard, pretty much impossible. So then I was like, well, I have a Storygraph account that I never use because, y'all, Storygraph is lonely. How are you supposed to talk to people over there? Anyway, I'm just going to use my Storygraph account as my TBR, I think. That's, step one. I think another thing I need to do is read authors I've already enjoyed, which you think would be a no-brainer. But I keep trying to find new authors that I love, and I rarely find one. I did find Claire Keegan last month. I hadn't read anything from her before, and I really liked her. She hasn't written much, but I did put one of her books on hold at the library. And also, a few months ago, somebody was gushing about Ottessa Moshfegh, who I actually have actively avoided because the postmodernist, feminist, whatever, I just, no. But I really liked Ottessa Moshfegh. So, number 2, read authors I've already enjoyed. The other thing I do is I go down these internet rabbit holes. Like I get on Reddit or I'm researching some topic, and then I put stuff on hold at the library based on what I find down those rabbit holes. Like the latest book I put on hold at the library is an 800-page book about Wagner. Do I know anything about Wagner? Do I have the slightest interest in Wagner? Am I going to read an 800-page book about Wagner? I mean, maybe. I started it. It seems kind of good. But anyway, I think the next step is avoid rabbit holes, or at least don't let them influence my TBR. And I think this tendency to get caught up in what other people like and to add all this obscure stuff to my TBR is because of my personality. Moving on to the therapy session of the video, you can drop me a bill in the comments for listening to this. Let me know how much you're charging me. My personality, I'm pretty easygoing. It's really easy for me to just go with the flow. But sometimes I go with the flow and go with the flow until I just roll right over the waterfall, onto the rocks. And I don't have a clue that I have a need or a want that I'm not tuned into. And I mean, it's not like I'm ignoring my wants or needs. It's just that sometimes I don't know what they are. Like, I'm not trying to be a martyr. Like, oh no, you take the last piece of cake when I really want the last piece of cake. No, it's just, I don't know I want the last piece of cake. And I'm definitely in tune with what I don't want, and I don't have any problem expressing that. I don't like romance. I don't like debut novels. I haven't read that much literary fiction, but I gotta say, I don't like it. But only defining books by what I don't want to read does not help me generate stuff to read, I need to ask myself before I check something out of the library or before I buy something if I really want to read it. Especially when it comes to the library, because I get most of my books at the library. So I've really got no skin in the game if I just check out an 800-page book about Wagner, because if I don't like it, I can DNF it. I don't think that's really the healthiest approach to reading. I think I need to be a little more invested. And I think the Reddit rabbit holes and the YouTube playlists are symptomatic of a much more insidious problem I have, something that I think most of us suffer from, which is because so many of us spend too much time online. I don't know exactly how to describe this. We live in what's possible instead of what's actual. Like, I probably spend more time looking for great books and thinking about books than I do reading. I would say that that's true. So I don't want to read something. I want to read something else. And this is a problem that is sort of the air that I breathe. So it's very hard to get out from under it. And I think it's especially insidious because it deludes me into believing that I'm making progress toward my goals when I'm really not. So I know that that is all way too deep and dark for a conversation about what's on my Kindle, but there it is. So the last step is that I need to get offline. Which is easier said than done. And I don't know, maybe I should just delete my YouTube channel, forget the whole thing. But I do feel like I get more out of books by having a BookTube channel, even though, I'm never going to be popular. I mean, who in the world makes black screen videos on YouTube? But I get more out of books by making videos. And I'm also going to try to make better videos. Like, I'm going to try to actually review books and not just run down what I read, So I think those are some of the problems and some of the steps that I need to take in order to fix my reading experience and make it better. There are a few genres and a few authors that I know I enjoy, and I think I need to stick with them for a while. I really like Japanese translated fiction. I like memoirs and biographies. I like a lot of fantasies, but I need to stay away from long series, I think. I like history. I don't like big sweeping history. I like smaller topics. I like books that are not humanist exactly, but I don't know, let's say kind of cozy pro-human, like books that basically like humans that are kind of rooting for us despite all of our foibles and that we've made everything a giant dumpster fire. That's my very niche little list. Um, yeah, I'm not exactly sure how to wrap this up. I guess I will try to make a TBR that kind of sticks within those guidelines. And I will try to do the things that I've mentioned here that I think will help me have a better reading experience. And then I will share that TBR with you maybe next time. So that's it for me. I'm really glad you're here. I hope we can chat about some of these things in the comments. Take care.